I've been walking these streets for 25 years, pounding the pavements. I know what's going on in the back rooms. I know what's going on in the boardrooms. What's the Deal is the place where the purple people hang out. We're the only show on television that allows a Democrat, a Republican, and an independent to come down and talk it out. The #1 show on television that always focuses on crypto. We tell you what's the real deal.
Who are we defending them from?
Excuse me, Richard.
That's one of the most insulting things I've ever heard.
Great.
Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of What's the Deal? I'm John Tobacco. For literally years, we have been hearing all about the Trump campaign and Russia and collusion and interference, and depending on what version of the Russia conspiracy theory you believe, President Trump is either a Russian agent, or he's being blackmailed by Russia, or his campaign colluded with the Russians in order to ensure his election. All that is pretty serious stuff. It certainly calls for an investigation, and boy, have we had some investigations. The issue of collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign has been investigated by the FBI, the DOJ under President Obama's leadership, the special counsel Robert Mueller's team of angry Democrats, as Trump calls them, the Senate Intelligence Committee, the House Intelligence Committee, and the House Oversight Committee. Even Michael Cohen, an admitted liar, wants you to know that the president is a racist and a con man and a cheat, had this to say about Russian collusion.
Questions have been raised about whether I know of direct evidence that Mr. Trump or his campaign colluded with Russia. I do not.
So after literally years and over $35 million, the number of Americans thus far indicted for criminally conspiring with Russia to influence the 2016 election is 0. So what now? Where do we go from here? Well, it's not just about Russia, and it's not just about the Trump campaign. Now other entities find themselves being probed also. The Trump Organization, the Trump Foundation, Trump Inaugural Committee, Trump Transition Team. Anyone basically that's ever met Donald Trump has to listen to Gerald Nadler, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, who just described his latest fishing expedition like this.
We will be issuing document requests to over 60 different people and individuals from the White House to the Department of Justice, Donald Trump Jr., Allen Weisselberg, to begin the investigations.
Is this really what you think our Congress should be focused on? Are things so great in this country that this is where our priorities should be? What's the deal? This has us asking the question, who are those who are watching, the watchers? Are they seasoned law enforcement officials? Are they seasoned investigators? No. There's the incredible shrinking man, Gerald Nadler, a professional politician who's done nothing but cash a government check for the last 40 years. There's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a former bartender who believes the world is ending in 12 years, and just recently, after 2 months in office, opened a district office here in New York. There's Sheila Jackson Lee. Her street cred is she thinks it's unfair that no hurricanes are named after African Americans. And then we have Cedric Richmond, who not only had his law license suspended for 2 months, but thought it was appropriate to make crude sexual jokes about White House counselor Kellyanne Conway. Are these really the people you want sitting in judgment of our president? Do you think the American people would make a better jury? I do. How about this? Let's make a deal. If you don't think the president's doing a good job, or if you think it's unethical, or if you think it's immoral, don't vote for him. Vote for the other guy. Make a campaign contribution to the other candidates. Start a PAC opposing him. But to continuously waste the time and money of the U.S. taxpayers is simply outrageous. We'll get into it throughout this week's show with our political panel coming up just right after this. But in closing, none of those elected to the oversight and the judiciary and the intelligence committee have any real professional background doing investigations. But yet, all of these committees are going to now reinvestigate all the things the FBI, the DOJ, and the special counsel have been investigating for 2 years at a cost of $35 million to you. And that's the deal for this week. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back right after this with U.S. Senate candidate Chele Farley, the woman who went head-to-head with Kirsten Gillibrand and was on the stage when Kirsten Gillibrand promised New Yorkers she'd serve out her term and not run for president. Chele Farley coming up right after this. Welcome back to What's the Deal? I'm John Tobacco. And while most of the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates have taken to Good Morning America to announce their candidate, there's at least one that chose to go the comedy route and announce her presidential candidacy on a late-night talk show.
I'm filing an exploratory committee for President of the United States tonight.
But wait a minute. I could have sworn just a few months ago New York's junior senator said she was committed to serving her full term, and she was not running for president. Take a look at this.
Just want to make this clear. You're saying you will not get out of the race and you will not run for president. You will serve your 6 years.
I will serve my 6-year term.
Okay. So what's the deal? Did Senator Gillibrand lie to New Yorkers? Or did she just suddenly change her mind after she got elected? If you think it's option 2, I have 3 very affordable bridges to sell you, which New York City paid billions to build. How could you be so brazen? She changed her position on this, just like she changed her position on guns. She changed her position on taxes, tobacco, President Clinton, and everything else I can think of. Here to help us break this down is the candidate that was standing next to Senator Gillibrand when she made that famous claim. Chele Farley, an Ivy League educated engineer and accomplished business executive, recent Republican candidate against Gillibrand for U.S. Senate, joins us tonight to tell you what's the deal. Chele, thank you very much for joining us on What's the Deal this week. So, you didn't have a lie detector set up in the debate.
I didn't, but actually, interestingly, the moderator, Bill Ritter, right after he asked her point blank, he said, "Are you vowing that you will serve your full term and you will not run for president?" And she said, "I will serve my full term." And he turned to me and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, frankly, I don't believe her.
Think she just suddenly changed her mind out of nowhere?
I don't. And frankly, I think she would have been much better off being honest. I mean, she knew the question was going to come up. Why didn't she simply say, right now my entire focus is on the people of New York?
What's her real record as a senator?
Well, John, her real record is she managed to pass one bill. One bill during her 10 years as senator. And let's go ahead and tack on those 2 years as a member of the House as well. When she was a member of the House, she was considered a blue dog Democrat, a very moderate, frankly conservative Democrat. During that time, as a member of the House, she had a rating from the NRA. What was the rating from the NRA?
Good.
She had an A rating from the NRA.
Right.
What is her rating from the NRA today?
Tell us.
It's an F. No great surprise.
I remember when Governor Patterson appointed her, Senator Al D'Amato was there at the announcement, and then last year, good old Senator Pothole endorsed you. What happened to make him change on her?
Oh, John, I was frankly very surprised. I had not had a conversation with him since I became the nominee. I had seen him in passing, and that was it. We were both together at an event in Long Island. I got up, gave my spiel, and lo and behold, he ended up being seated next to me. I didn't even know he was going to be there. He raised his hand after my speech and said he wanted to speak. And I was like, oh, this is not good.
Right.
Because I had been told he's very close with her family,
right,
and that he would just simply stay out of this race. He got up on stage and did a 10-minute diatribe about the fact that she doesn't care. It was a very colorful language. You know, she doesn't give 2 blanks in a bucket about the people of New York. And that, I can, and should win this if everybody in that room, would vote for me. And he said he would max out to my campaign, and he did. And I was very happy to have his support. I also got an endorsement from the president, somewhat like that, where we were together at an event, and I saw him in the photo line, and I said, President Trump, I'd really love your endorsement. He said, absolutely, we'll work on the timing of it. And 10 minutes later, he got up on stage, and he was like, Chele Farley, where is Chele Farley? Yeah. And he said, hey, look, on the merits, you should win. You've been working really hard. And he said, I know your opponent. And, what has she done? She's gotten one bill passed, one bill to rename a post office. And it's just not good enough. And it's the reason why 1 million people have left New York since the last census.
But speaking of my friend David Patterson, he's the one that gave her a statewide office, and he gave her a nationwide platform. And then she doesn't even mention the guy in her book. You would think he elevated her to everything she is with the stroke of a pen. What does that say about her character? I
agree. In fact, he even says that she stabbed him in the back. But again, I am entirely focused on what she's doing for the people of New York. I mean, why have 1 million people left? 1 million people have left because our taxes are too high. I mean, what's astounding is AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's mother, just admitted in the paper this week that she left New York to move to Florida because of the taxes. She was paying $10,000 a year in property taxes in New York, and she's paying less than $1,000 in Florida. No surprise.
How do you think the economy is doing right now under President Trump?
I think the economy is doing well. I mean, we can just see that based on the unemployment figures and how the stock market is doing. And I think if it continues, that bodes very well for the president getting reelected. So
far, since Donald Trump's in office, Obama said it was a myth that he can get to 2% growth. Mm-hmm. We're at 3.5, nearing 4. In just 2 years, we've had tax cuts, we've had regulation cuts. We see booming economies, not these green shoots that Ben Bernanke and Barack Obama were talking about. Real, robust growth. We see repatriation of billions, nearing trillions of dollars coming back to the U.S. Manufacturing jobs are coming back. We are going to take a quick break. We're going to come back right after this with Chele Farley. We're going to talk about tax reform, how it affects New York, how it affects you, your tax return this year, and a whole bunch of other great stuff from the person that was standing on the stage with Kristen Gillibrand when she said she would not run for president. You're watching What's the Deal? We'll take a quick break. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. You're watching What's the Deal? The show that still doesn't kneel. We debunked the blue wave going back a couple months ago about how the Democrats were going to crush the House. They were going to take back the Senate. We broke it down right here on What's the Deal to the blue ripple. And now the reasons that we kept the Senate, the reasons why Donald Trump's approval ratings continue to go up, despite him fighting every major news network except Fox every single day, is because of deregulation, because of Supreme Court justices. And if you ask me, one of the real boosts to the economy, Chele Farley, was the tax reform package that put more money in small business people's pocket and incentivized them to go out, hire, innovate, and grow. And that's why we're seeing this growth. What do you think overall about this tax package?
Look, I think the tax package was great for the country. Absolutely no question we are seeing that. Unfortunately, it was not as great for New York. And that is because New York has taxes that are just too high. I mean, it is ridiculous, and we've gotten away with it. Basically, the governor's been able to get away with it because you were able to deduct them. Now they put a cap on it. And the cap, frankly, is too low. I mean, when it is $10,000, the average property tax bill, do you know, in Westchester, $18,000 a year. Too high. But when you've only got $10,000, we should have doubled that number.
We need people to elect more Republicans so that we can lower our state spending and our city spending. Last week, we were talking about de Blasio with New York City Councilman Eric Ulrich. He's got the New York City budget to $92 billion. And just this week in the news, in case you missed it, there's some odd $850 million that was given to Bill de Blasio's wife to start a mental health campaign that she doesn't know what happened to it, right? Isn't that a call to action to go out there and elect Republicans who will be fiscally conservative?
Absolutely. I talked to so many people in the Senate, and they said, look, the reality was there was nobody in the room fighting for the SALT deduction. Everybody got to have their one pet issue. Look, Marco Rubio was able to get the child tax credit doubled in exchange for his vote. But there was nobody from New York who was willing to do anything. I also proposed something that was very popular in New York City, which is, why is it you cannot deduct your rent off your federal taxes, right? You can deduct the interest on your mortgage, capped at a $750,000 mortgage. That's about $3,500 a month. So I propose letting people deduct up to $3,000 a month off their taxes.
But speaking of the economy, I have to ask you about an issue which activists say will not only revitalize our economy, but end climate change. We've touched on it a little bit before, but this Green New Deal, which now has support all over the country, in your view, what is it?
Well, it's like everything else. It sounds good until you actually get into the nitty-gritty. And it's like, what kind of difference would it really make? You're looking at your own utility costs quadrupling. I mean, New York already has utility costs that are 35% above the national average. And who are the major polluters in the world? It's India and China. We're not addressing that at all.
President Trump recently poked some fun at the Green New Deal. Let's take a quick look at the 2-hour and 2-minute CPAC speech from Donald Trump.
No planes, no energy. When the wind stops blowing, that's the end of your electric. Let's scream. Harold, is the wind blowing today? I'd like to watch television.
So, Chele, are people really going to stop eating hamburgers and riding on airplanes?
I love hamburgers, and you're right. How else are you going to get to Europe? You're certainly not taking a train to Europe. Maybe
the Titanic, or maybe Frank, we might want to talk to Perillo about setting up some special cruises. My executive producer, Frank Morano. Frank is heard every Sunday on AM 970 The Answer here in New York, and Perillo is one of your very special sponsors. Chele, you were an exciting new candidate. Do you think we'll see you run for office again?
Let's see. I mean, I got 2 million votes in New York, which was fantastic. And certainly I feel, as you stated, that the New York delegation has just lost its way. They are focused on issues that do not affect, the average working class person.
I congratulate you and thank you for at least standing up for us and the New Yorkers who rarely have a voice in this state of one-party rule. I want to thank Chele Farley. It's a pleasure to have you with us. I hope as you consider your options down the line, you'll keep our humble What's the Deal show in your plans to make an announcement or tell us all the great things that you're going to do. But thank you very much for being with us. Hopefully we'll have you back again soon. Stay tuned. We need you to watch the commercials for about 1.5 minutes. Keep our sponsors happy, or you're not going to see JT and What's the Deal anymore if you don't watch those commercials. You're watching What's the Deal, the show that doesn't kneel. We'll be back right after this with our politics panel. You're watching What's the Deal. Welcome back. You're watching What's the Deal. I'm John Tobacco. Every week on What's the Deal, we break down the age-old question on a host of topics. What's the deal? And we bring in people who know where the rubber meets the road. I always talk about this silent majority in America. I call them the purple people. And I usually try to wear something purple because in What's the Deal America, the all reds and the all blues are zealots. And most of the people I know are some of a little of the each. And I call them the purple people. And What's the Deal is where the purple people hang out. Every week we bring in a Republican, a Democrat, an independent to give everybody a say. And instead of creating noise where everything gets lost in the middle, we try to bring you the real deal. We all remember President Trump's signature campaign promise to build that wall. And he's going to build that wall on the southern border where drugs and sex traffickers are flowing into the country. Both houses of Congress for over 2 years now still haven't given him the appropriate appropriations to build that damn wall. And now that the Democrats control the House, thank you, Paul Ryan, a wall seems even less likely. So our president, using the art of the deal, tries another strategy.
I'm going to be signing a national emergency.
So now, after he gets some money from the Democrats, and if you remember, Nancy Pelosi said not $1, But in fact, he got $1+ billion out of her, and now he's using his presidential powers to reallocate money that he's well within his legal right to, and declared a national emergency to fund the wall. But there's still, of course, some pushback, not only from Democratic critics, but some generally friendly quarters like Rand Paul, who's typically aligned with the president. And so the House of Representatives passes a resolution denouncing evil Trump's wall, denouncing the national emergency declaration. Some Republicans voted with the Democrats. And now it goes to the Senate, where President Trump is facing off against Rand Paul. What happens next? Will the president override the veto? I think so. Will he head back down to the border, or will this end up in the courts? Let's ask our political panel of all-stars on the left, very left, my dear friend and legendary TV and radio talk show host Richard Bay joins us on What's the Deal. On the right, we have Nan Hayworth back for a second time. Nan is a Republican, formerly a physician, and also the esteemed Congresswoman from right here in New York, representing a very Trumpian district, at least a mixed district where Donald Trump won something in New York. And of course, we have libertarian activist Larry Sharpe, who most recently ran a valiant campaign for governor here in New York, and his efforts got the Libertarian Party ballot access, which is a great accomplishment. My panel, thank you very much. Let me start from the left, and Richard, go crazy. I'm sure you got
I'm not going to go crazy.
Planned.
What
like happens next?
I'd just like to make a correction. It's not that the president will override the veto. It's Congress overriding the president's veto, because it's Congress, and that's one of the reasons Rand Paul, who is a libertarian Republican, I think is voting against this, because the Constitution specifically gives the power of the purse strings to Congress, and that there has never been an instance since the inception of the Emergency Powers Act for the president where the president has been authorized to take money specifically against the
wishes of Congress?
The will and the commission of Congress. I mean, that's never happened.
Well,
it's
Larry,
their power.
You're in line. Your political thought is in line with Rand Paul on some things. Many presidents before Donald Trump have used presidential powers to appropriate funds and resources for a host of issues outside of America. So what's the problem with inside America?
They were wrong then, and he is wrong now. It's the same. This is a terrible idea. If Trump gets away with this, just wait till the next Democratic president gets on board. They're going to declare national emergency for health care and create single payer. National emergency for school shootings. They're going to get rid of the Second Amendment.
Climate change.
Climate change. You got it. That is going to happen. This is a bad precedent. It's a bad idea. The former presidents were wrong, and Trump is wrong here.
Nan, it looks like it's me and you against those two. But come in with some sanity from the right.
John, I think the president has a lot of facts on the ground that support his contention that we are in a dire situation at the southern border. Continual progress of caravans that actually pose great risk to the folks who are, forgive me, in the caravans. We do have drugs crossing the southern border, not just at ports of entry, that's where they're apprehended, but crossing where they're not being apprehended. President Obama's head of Customs and Border Patrol feels that President Trump is right to declare this emergency. The Democrats in the Senate in, I think, 2006 voted for $8 billion worth of funding for border walls as part of a larger package. So I think the Democratic motivation in passing the current budget allowance was highly political. Yes, there's politics on the president's side too. Fair enough, there is. And the National Emergencies Act does need to be modified.
Is what President Trump doing constitutional?
Yes, because
right.
he is
Based upon
because
what?
He is empowered, Richard, simply because he's empowered by law You can argue with the National Emergencies Act. I would too.
I know, but a statute can be unconstitutional, can't it?
Well, yes, it has to be challenged then in the Supreme Court.
Well,
the
then,
Congress can modify it.
And what did Robert Jackson say when President Truman tried to nationalize the steel industry during a war in an emergency situation? And Robert Jackson said, when the president exercises his power in concert with Congress, he is at his strongest point. When he does it without the backing of Congress, he is at his weakest.
I agree, and it would be far better if he did have the backing of Congress, and I think there is a lot
Not
of
far better, it would be constitutional.
But there is a lot of politicized opposition to this president, as evidenced by the cascade of investigations that congressional Democrats are planning.
None of this matters in the case that he shouldn't be just deciding that this is an emergency and I'm taking the money.
No, I understand.
That's wrong regardless. It doesn't matter.
When President Trump promised incessantly that they would build the wall, who's going to pay for it? Mexico! Well, Mexico's not. It's the same thing with the Second Amendment.
Richard, campaign promises are frequently, don't.
Yeah, but they were cited today. It's hypocritical to say campaign promises don't count when you're citing it as a basis for him following through on it.
I'll tell you what. Mexico is housing so many
they're cooperating.
So many caravanners
on their side of the border.
I wouldn't call them caravanners. They're immigrants.
They are aspiring immigrants.
When did they become caravanners?
Maybe invaders.
That's another way of invaders. That's a way of dehumanizing them. Why don't you call them roaches and just get right down to it? They're caravanners.
Well, what are they, Rich?
They are migrants.
Migrants.
Right.
Okay.
Asylum seekers, most of them.
No, they are not legitimate asylum seekers. That is being used to allow them to ask for a generous package of benefits. That's the primary reason most of these folks who should be
you've gone down and interviewed all of them, I'm sure.
Have you?
No, but I do know where they're coming from. Yes. Do you know what's going on in Guatemala?
Yes.
And Richard, Honduras? Do you have an idea?
That is
would anybody want to leave that? Can you think of any other reason? I think I'll go to America and get myself a package of benefits.
That is why.
That's not why they're leaving.
Why are they leaving?
They're leaving because they're living in a hellhole that we helped to create.
No, that's right. They're leaving because we decided to intervene inside their countries and make things terrible. That's why they're leaving. If we would have left their countries alone, they wouldn't be rushing to our country.
It was not American intervention that created their deep.
But what is the solution?
We're sending boatloads of money to these countries also, these Latin American countries.
Boatloads.
We are, and there are many non-governmental aid agencies.
Actually, I thought we cut off. I think we cut off funding for some of these Central American.
Maybe recently, yes.
It would be
because of our drug war.
Can we shift this
because of our drug war?
Well, what would be the libertarian solution?
Leave those countries alone. Let them grow the way they want to grow without our intervention. Second,
so don't give them money.
That's correct.
And don't send any of our CIA or special forces in there. Just leave them alone.
We had our own revolution. We had our own civil war. Good. They should have theirs also.
Welcome back. You're watching What's the Deal on Newsmax TV. What's the Deal is the place where the purple people hang out, and there are no political shows on television that bring on a Republican, a Democrat, and an independent to talk through the issues. We're talking, we're yelling, we're screaming, and we have one of the greatest entertainers of all time rooting on the failure of the economy. This week in the New York Times, columnist David Brooks, certainly not considered an ally of the president, called Medicare for All the impossible dream. But that's not stopping multiple 2020 presidential candidates from making this a signature issue, including Bernie Sanders, who was standing in the snow in Brooklyn trying to root on his Brooklyn roots. Meantime, he's flying around in private jets and spending weekends at his lake house. But here's what Bernie had to say.
The United States is going to join every other major country on earth and guarantee health care to all people as a right.
And what was once a fringe view, even in the Democratic Party, is now seemingly mainstream for the ever-growing crop of Democratic presidential candidates. Let me begin with the only doctor in the House, Nan Hayward. Nan,
yes, sir.
Tell us from a doctor, take the legislators, take the Congress ladies' hat off, and tell us from a doctor's point of view where the pitfalls are in Medicare for All.
Healthcare for all is what we want to have. We want to make sure that everybody in this country, no matter whether they're new immigrants or folks who've been here for generations, has access to affordable healthcare of high quality. We can do that. And it is a dream that's not impossible. But it's a really bad idea to put the federal government in charge of it. And that's the problem with the Medicare for All.
You, just from a doctor's standpoint, when you've dealt with billing issues and collections issues.
And I've dealt with Medicare. I was a Medicare provider. And I've also worked in the VA.
Is there any worse provider of services than the federal government?
The VA is
the worst.
Definitely, the worst.
I'm a veteran.
Healthcare. Yeah, thank you for your service, sir.
Yeah. Medicare for all is VA for all.
Exactly.
That's what it actually will become, VA for all.
Well,
it's a disaster.
let me just tell you something.
Horrible.
As probably the only person in this room who is on Medicare, I think it's great. And I don't have to wait for any treatment. And I can see almost any doctor I want. And I get my pharmaceuticals, everything that I might need. And I think Medicare is great.
Of course,
and
Richard.
don't try to take. And I've paid into Medicare
How do we
for
pay for
almost
it?
my
How do
entire
we
life.
pay for it?
I don't support Medicare for all. I support allowing people to have a government buy-in. Now, if you were going to buy into Medicare, you could probably do that for about $445 a month. I would also like to see the Medicare benefit age requirement, actually, brought down to 50 as a start. That would be fine. And then offer a public buy-in to Medicare.
You may be aware of this, but if not, this is a very telling figure.
Yeah, my Medicare, what I'm going to get from Medicare is probably more, just like Social Security.
Precisely, but
Right.
that creates an enormous problem. It is a pyramid scheme. On average, Richard, on average, I mean, it's just, and I wish you nothing
Spending
but...
$1 trillion a
Richard,
year on a
I agree
military
with you.
to go around the
Hold on,
world
hold on.
to protect my
Hold on.
freedom. Where?
Hold
In
on. Richard,
Iraq? In Grenada? In Vietnam?
Well,
Wait
even
a
in
minute.
these
All right.
instances,
Hold
even in
up.
these instances, President Trump says, "Hey, let's pull our troops back from
He did.
Syria."
He did.
And
Yeah.
they go crazy about that.
Well,
so
you
you don't want to spend on the military.
We have
you wanna end
2,000
wars.
people
Barack
in-
Obama said he was going to end 2 wars, and we expanded on 2 wars. The
And
one
he sent
thing,
billions and billions of dollars to Iran.
Larry, you're in the military.
I was.
You want to spend money so that our fighting men and women have the best tools, the best resources.
100%.
Of course you do.
Of course.
But why can't the Democrats at least say, "Hey, okay, we're pulling out of Syria. Good job."
I agree with you. I support Trump when it comes to removing our troops out of Syria. 100%. Yes. 100%. Yes. I want us to stop fighting other people's civil wars.
We're going to have 200.
Right?
We're going to have
I don't want us
200
fighting other
servicemen there.
people, whether we had 5. That's 5 Marines that won't die
Yeah,
in Syria for no reason.
except for the
I
fact-
would rather have those Marines here in our country. Put them on the border if you want. I'm fine.
Trump increased the military budget over, what was it, $200 billion over what, or $20 billion, excuse me, over what they were even asking for, which is already. But why? We have a military.
I'll tell you
We
why.
have a military that's larger than the next 7 nations in the world combined.
It is a jobs program. That's what it is.
You're right,
It is
right.
a jobs program.
That's part of
Our
it.
That's
military
socialism, isn't it?
Yes, and I'm against it. Yes,
oh
I
my
am.
God, the military
That
is a
correct.
socialist experiment.
What's happening
Oh
here is
my
the
God, don't tell Bernie
military-industrial
Sanders.
complex is a jobs program.
Let's go back to the single payer. Some people call the idea of single payer nothing short of socialism.
Disaster.
Bernie
Terrible.
Sanders
Terrible.
and
Terrible.
Democratic Congresswoman AOC, yeah, you know me, have described themselves as democratic socialists. Just a few years ago, it would have been unthinkable for a major presidential candidate to openly run as a socialist. And it seems President Trump is clearly trying to make socialism a key issue of the 2020 campaign. Larry, you're a libertarian.
I am.
So you're in the middle. You're supposed to be the most objective in this group.
That's true, I am. That's true.
Why are so many young people embracing socialism or the
When
idea of it?
people, just in general, when people are afraid, we tend to make bad decisions. That's just human nature. When groups of people are afraid, we scream for either socialism always scream for a strong man. If you lean more left, you tend to scream for socialism. If you lean more right, you tend to scream more for a strong man. But if you're a socialist,
not on the right.
Yes, we tend to. You tend to scream more for a strong man, right?
No.
So what happens all the time, right? So what winds up happening is it's someone you trust. So you believe my socialism will be okay because it's my guy, or my strong man will be okay because it's my guy. The youth tend to go towards socialism because of two reasons. One, they've been raised in these last 10 years. These last 10 years, they don't own anything. These last 10 years have been very hard for the youth. Yep. Most of them can't afford cars. Most can't afford houses. Most have 3, 4, 5 roommates. They don't own anything. So now here comes someone
Thanks to government meddling in the economy.
That's correct. So now all of a sudden someone says, I can give you stuff. I can make things easier for you.
They're not going to give you a car. They're not going to give you a...
That's not what I said. They don't have an ownership society. They don't own much.
Well, I have a different take. I think
he asked me though.
Okay,
so I'm just saying that's why the youth are going towards socialism. They don't own stuff.
People didn't own stuff during the Depression either.
And they liked socialism back then too.
That's correct.
Yes,
and you know what?
Exactly correct.
During the Depression, socialism, you said a socialist couldn't get elected? One got elected 4 times. His name was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, one of the great presidents in American history.
No,
he changed the country. Americans chose him 4 times.
That doesn't make
over
them smart.
Dewey, over a businessman, Wendell Wilkie.
That's afraid people are making bad decisions. I've discussed this.
4 times they reelected him, and he was a disaster.
4 times they made a mistake. Yes.
Read Amity Shlaes, The Forgotten Man.
Sure.
Read it and weep. She is absolutely right.
And go read about the bonus marchers who were rioting right outside of Congress, and a country that was teetering on the edge of embracing Marxism. And FDR pulled us back from the brink by understanding that a humane society will take care of its weakest and will provide a safety net that allows us to be a civilized country.
So, Richard, do you believe that we would be better off as a socialist nation?
No, I'm not a socialist, but I believe that there are socialist elements of America that exist right now. They are very popular. They work in almost every other country in the civilized, modern country.
Primarily
in the
because
world.
we pay for their defense.
And who are we defending them from anyway? Who are we defending Canada from? Who's invading Canada?
They rely
Who
on
are we
our
defending them
Excuse
from?
me, Richard. They rely on our carriers. They rely on our nuclear
For what?
shield. They rely
For defense from what?
We give
Saddam Hussein?
We give 90%.
Grenada?
We give 90% of the funding.
Ho Chi Minh? Who are we defending them from? When was there a war? You know what? Listen, I appreciate every American who serves his country in the military. But the fetish we have for the military in this country, I'm sorry. I appreciate your service. I respect your service. But you didn't defend my freedom in Vietnam. You didn't defend my freedom in Grenada. You didn't defend my freedom in Iraq. And you know who did? Lawyers, the ACLU, judges, activists. Those people.
That's one of the most insulting things I've ever heard.
Great, I know, it's provocative. Who did they defend me from?
Our military
World War II, you defended me from Hitler, and my father was the greatest generation who flew
went out there
bombers.
with a target on their back, wherever they were.
Where'd you
around the
go?
world,
I know, they
because
were sent by a government that bullshitted them about WMD. That's where they went.
Did
They
FDR
were
send
sent.
the troops anywhere in his 4 terms?
You're absolutely right.
did.
I just mentioned Hitler
did,
and
right?
Japan
You did,
attacked us. Yeah, but since
Were
then.
those guys defending your freedoms?
Yes, they were, but I wasn't alive at the time.
Well,
so was George
were they
Washington.
defending your parents' freedom to procreate you at that time? I would assume yes, because you're here and you're as vociferous as ever.
I've ceded that point, but I'm saying since World War II, I don't think we fought a war that was necessarily. I will agree, except from one war, the Cold War.
On the libertarian side, a very good friend of mine and one of my business mentors is Dr. Patrick Byrne, well-known libertarian.
Overstock man.
Overstock.
Absolutely.
And who would you like to see the libertarians?
I'd love for him to be that guy. Absolutely. If he's watching, give me a call. We've spoken before. Talked to him last year about it. I'd love for him to be our guy. I think he's exactly
Who else
the right
excites
guy.
you out there?
That's the guy that excites me. That guy right there. If he's the one who could do it, I'm in. I'd love for him to do that. That, I think, is one of our best shots.
I don't want to nuke the excitement here, but I do want to shift topics quick to the denuclearization of North Korea and the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. 10 words or less. Was Trump right to walk away from the table?
Yeah.
I agree.
Larry,
Yeah,
what do you think?
I want to go further. I'm very happy he actually has stepped up and met with the Koreans. I'm happy about that. I want us to be talking more to people supposed to be our enemies. I wish he'd do it with the Iranians too. Sure. I wish he'd go one step further. I wish he'd then say, you know what, Iranians, let's talk to all of them. I love that he talked to them. I wish he had a deal, obviously. Right. But if there wasn't a deal, there wasn't a deal. Hopefully he'll go back again, and I hope he'll get one.
I agree.
And
yeah, good deal. I'm totally on board.
Congressperson, did he do the right thing?
He did the right thing, and this negotiations are always based on leverage and incentives. So, what is the incentive for Kim Jong-un to denuclearize? It's got to be a pretty strong incentive on his part because he does not want to give up that.
Right.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter is,
John, you just missed something. We all agreed.
We do.
Fantastic.
So,
yes, absolutely. Yes.
That's your purple moment. You're watching What's the Deal, the show that doesn't kneel, and no one is kneeling on their topics. Tonight, this new congresswoman from up in Minnesota, Ilham Omar, does not seem to be understanding the etiquette of a new congressperson. She's already put out at least 3 statements that have been highly anti-Semitic, and it seems like she keeps getting a pass from her own party. What should the party do with someone who's spewing anti-Semitism?
There's no set etiquette. Obviously, it helps tremendously if you can be on board with your team. Congresswoman Omar is there primarily to represent her district. I abhor anti-Semitic statements. It is the policy of the United States to be in alliance with the State of Israel. It's not helpful to have expressed what clearly is a deeply hostile and troubling view of the Jewish people that Congresswoman Omar has.
She should be able to say what she feels any way she wants to say it. And I would actually rather her be open about it than in the closet, to be forward with you.
And Rand
if
Paul,
I've got
has,
to pick,
Rand
they
Paul
should say
has
it,
said some of the very same things.
And he should be able to. All I'm saying is the Democratic Party should say, we support her or we don't, or those are her views or they aren't. But she should say what she feels, if that's what she... I'd rather have it out front.
I'm Jewish. I don't find it anti-Semitic.
There we go.
Okay? So is everybody here Jewish or not?
I'm not Jewish.
I'm married to...
Okay, but I am Jewish. So I'm the only Jew in the entire room here, and I don't find her comments anti-Semitic.
Our one token Jewish person on the panel tonight is not insulted at all. So I don't know how the rest of us can be insulted. This has been probably the most exciting panel.
I think it was. I'm so happy to be here. This was great, and you guys were terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you have to have us back now.
100%.
There we go.
We will have you back. I don't know if I can handle all 3 of you at the same time, but it might help the show if I split you guys up and excite some other panels. But yeah,
we're an act.
you know, my executive producer Frank Morano is sometimes on camera with us, sometimes off camera, but always working behind the scenes, doing all the legwork. I just come in and sit down and start reading and talking, but Frankie does all the hard work. And I want to thank him for gathering you guys and having me here.
Frank Morano.
There he is. There he is. That's our guy. You know him. You know who he is. But I want to thank you guys very much for being here. We'll certainly have you back. And you're watching What's the Deal? I don't even have anything else to say. Thanks for tuning in.